Imagine a man so brilliant, so daring, that he carved an empire stretching from Greece to the edge of India, all before the age of 33. His name? Alexander the Great. But what if I told you that behind his legendary conquests lay a single catastrophic decision that would cost him his legacy, his army, and perhaps even his life? Dive into the gripping tale of ambition, genius, and one fatal blunder that changed history forever. And if you're intrigued by stories that reveal the untold secrets of history, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Legacy of Eris. Alexander the Great, history's most celebrated conqueror, the man who brought the known world to its knees, stretching his empire from Greece to the edge of India. His name stands as a symbol of brilliance, ambition, and invincibility. But even the greatest of men are not immune to failure. And for Alexander, one blunder would define the unraveling of his legacy. Born in 356 BCE, Alexander ascended to the Macedonian throne at just 20 years old. Under his command, his army became an unstoppable force, defeating the mighty Persian Empire and expanding his rule to unprecedented heights. His vision went beyond mere conquest. Alexander dreamed of uniting the world under his rule, blending Greek and local cultures to create a new civilization that would endure for centuries. His charisma, intelligence, and strategic genius made him a legend in his own time. From the plains of Gaugamela to the mighty walls of Tyre, Alexander's triumphs showcased his unparalleled tactical mind. His soldiers worshipped him, willing to follow him to the ends of the earth. "The world is not enough," Alexander would declare to his men. "We will march until the edges of the earth bow to Macedon." Each victory fueled his ambition, and each conquered city solidified his vision of a world united under one ruler. Yet, for all his brilliance, Alexander's unwavering drive masked a dangerous flaw: his inability to recognize the limits of his men and the fragility of his empire. The turning point came during Alexander's campaign in India. Having crossed the Hindu Kush mountains and subjugated much of modern-day Pakistan, he set his sights on further expansion into the Indian subcontinent. But the deeper he ventured into unfamiliar territory, the more the cracks began to show. His men had followed him for years, braving harsh climates, fierce resistance, and grueling marches. Exhaustion, homesickness, and dwindling morale began to take their toll. Alexander, however, was undeterred. He believed that his men, like himself, were destined for greatness. In 326 BCE, Alexander faced one of his most formidable challenges: the Indian king Porus and his army. Porus's forces were unlike anything Alexander's men had encountered before, boasting massive war elephants that trampled through ranks of soldiers with devastating force. Despite the odds, Alexander devised a brilliant strategy to outmaneuver Porus's army. Using the cover of night and exploiting the river's natural terrain, he launched a surprise attack that secured his victory. Porus, impressed by Alexander's courage and tactical brilliance, was allowed to retain his kingdom as a vassal. It was a triumph that further cemented Alexander's reputation as a military genius. But the cost of this victory was steep. The battle had drained the morale and energy of Alexander's already weary soldiers. Their longing for home grew stronger, and whispers of dissent began to spread. When Alexander announced plans to push further east, his army, for the first time, resisted. Standing before his men, Alexander implored them to continue. "Do you not see the glory that awaits us? The world will sing of our conquests for centuries," he pleaded. But his once loyal soldiers, who had marched thousands of miles and fought countless battles, could not be swayed. "And what of our lives, Alexander? What of our families waiting for us? We cannot march any further," one soldier declared, echoing the sentiments of the entire army. For Alexander, the mutiny was a bitter pill to swallow. He had never faced opposition from his men, and their refusal to follow him further east marked the first time his vision was thwarted. Reluctantly, he agreed to turn back. Yet his decision was not without consequence. The discontent that had festered among his troops would haunt him for the remainder of his journey. The return to Babylon was fraught with hardship. Rather than taking the safer route back through the lands they had already conquered, Alexander made a fateful decision. He chose to lead his army through the Gedrosian Desert, a vast expanse of arid, unforgiving terrain. Scholars have debated his reasons for this choice. Some suggest it was an attempt to prove his resilience and solidify his legacy. Others believe it was a punishment for his soldiers' insubordination. Whatever the reason, the decision proved disastrous. The Gedrosian Desert was a merciless foe. Temperatures soared, water was scarce, and the sand seemed endless. Thousands of men perished from thirst and exhaustion. Supplies dwindled, and what little food they had left was often lost in sandstorms. Men who had survived years of warfare succumbed to the unforgiving conditions. The army that had once seemed invincible was reduced to a shadow of its former self. Alexander himself bore witness to the suffering of his men. As he rode through the desert, he saw the toll his decisions had taken. His face, once filled with determination and confidence, now betrayed traces of regret. For a leader who had always believed in his destiny, the sight of his dying soldiers was a harsh reminder of his fallibility. When Alexander and his army finally emerged from the desert, the cost of their journey was staggering. Tens of thousands of lives had been lost, and the survivors were left physically and emotionally shattered. The once mighty Macedonian army, which had conquered the known world, was no longer the formidable force it had been. Alexander's decision to march through the desert had not only weakened his army, but also eroded the loyalty and trust of his men. Upon his return to Babylon in 323 BCE, Alexander sought to rebuild and consolidate his empire. He envisioned new campaigns, new cities, and further integration of the diverse cultures within his domain. But his plans were cut short. At the age of 32, Alexander fell ill during a banquet. Fever racked his body, and within days, the great conqueror was dead. His death plunged the empire into chaos. Without a clear successor, Alexander's generals, known as the Diadochi, divided his vast territories among themselves, leading to decades of conflict and fragmentation. The dream of a unified empire, which Alexander had devoted his life to building, crumbled in the aftermath of his death. Historians have long debated the causes of Alexander's downfall. Was it his relentless ambition which pushed his men beyond their limits? His refusal to heed the warnings of his advisors? Or the disastrous decision to march through the Gedrosian Desert? Perhaps it was a combination of all these factors. What is certain is that Alexander's greatest blunder was not a single event, but a series of choices driven by his insatiable desire for glory. Alexander the Great was a man of unparalleled brilliance and vision. His conquests reshaped the ancient world, spreading Greek culture and influence far beyond its borders. Yet, his legacy is a double-edged sword. On one hand, he achieved feats that few could ever imagine. On the other, his inability to temper his ambition ultimately led to the unraveling of his empire. Alexander's story serves as a powerful reminder of the complexities of leadership and the perils of overreach. Even the greatest among us are not immune to the consequences of their choices. What lessons can we draw from his triumphs and failures? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by the untold stories of history's greatest figures, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Eris. Together, we'll continue exploring the moments that shape the world as we know it.